Well, that economic impact can be felt in almost every industry. Sean Stein Smith, assistant professor of Lehman College at City University of New York, joins us now live for more. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
So as we saw, we have U.S. stocks swinging so wildly day to day as travel bans, stimulus measures, and the spread of the virus continues. What's your take on the stimulus measures being taken by the president and the Federal Reserve?
I would say that currently right now it's too early to actually say the ultimate impact of the current efforts being made at the White House, at the Fed, and by the Congress, because frankly, it's too early to see ultimately sort of what those ultimately will add up to be. I mean, all of those talks and measures are still evolving, fast-moving, and are really a still work in progress. I would say that today at the White House, it was more of a 1-2 punch, focusing on the healthcare side of thing, on the health policy angle of it, and also trying to prop up other areas of the market that were sort of beat up this week. It was more of a calm the markets and to try to set up for more efforts going forward.
And what do you see as the biggest economic concerns for the economy right now?
I would say the top concern right now is the uncertainty as to when this outbreak is actually going to be curbed, because right now there are pro sports being impacted, institutions of higher education, retail, restaurants, the arts are all being impacted by this. And the real question out there right now that is unable to be answered is, when will things go back to normal?
So then which aspects of the U.S. labor market or types of jobs are most exposed to the economic fallout from COVID-19? As we mentioned, a lot of companies scaling back, a lot of business being disrupted.
Absolutely. And the biggest area that is going to be impacted and is already going to be impacted are the hourly jobs, right? In the service, retail, sort of customer engagement areas, as those industries are the most impacted during this outbreak.
Now, businesses are also trying to figure out work from home options to protect their workers. You also have school closings, which means parents have to stay home from work with them. What are some of the unintended consequences that come with this sort of disruption?
So the biggest unintended consequence from a work from home policy is going to be the fact that not all employees have access to high-speed Wi-Fi or the tech setup at home to actually work and to access firm data on a continuous basis. And I would say going forward, all of these issues are going to push the conversation after the fact towards a more robust and comprehensive policy on 5G and other advanced IT tools to help firms and their employees work more efficiently, both on-site and off-site.
And just quickly, obviously we saw a lot of private businesses up there with Donald Trump. How key will public-private partnerships be in really managing this national emergency?
So the biggest upside that I took away from that press conference today, it was really a show of force and a show of confidence. Basically, the government and the private sector joining forces to help us combat arguably the biggest health crisis ever.
All right, thank you so much, Sean. Now don't go anywhere because we'll be coming back to you in just a minute. Well, Spain declares a state of emergency. Other European countries shut down borders. The World Health Organization says the continent is now the epicenter of the global pandemic. CGTN's Guy Henderson reports from Geneva.
First Italy, now Spain.
Buenas tardes.
Good evening, esteemed citizens. Today, I have informed the head of state that tomorrow we will hold an extraordinary cabinet meeting to declare a state of emergency throughout the whole of Spain for the next 15 days. The state of emergency is a legal tool recognized in our constitution to confront a crisis as extraordinary as that which now faces the entire world and our own country.
Bulgaria too has declared an emergency after confirming just 23 cases, but it and others know the trend by now. Denmark's one of a number of countries that's seen a massive rise in cases this week. It's now advising citizens against all but essential travel. Ukraine, Czech Republic and Slovakia are amongst the European countries introducing severe restrictions on entry for foreigners, seemingly to try and prevent the same happening to them. On Friday, the World Health Organization said shutting borders won't work on its own. It's launched a fund that anyone can donate to help fight the virus.
You must take a comprehensive approach. Not testing alone, not contact tracing alone, not quarantine alone, not social distancing alone. Do it all. Any country that looks at the experience of other countries with large epidemics and thinks that won't happen to us is making a deadly mistake. It can happen to any country.
As of Thursday, it was reporting 117 cases. With well over 2,000 cases in Germany, large gatherings have already ceased, but Berlin's famous Philharmonie is still performing, streaming for audiences online. This continent is now the epicenter of a pandemic unseen in modern times. Governments are responding rapidly, their citizens adapting to a new norm. Guy Henderson, CGTN, Geneva.
Well, let's bring Sean Stein Smith in again to talk about the economic impact of COVID-19 in Europe. So, Sean, as we saw the recent travel ban on almost all European countries, what are the most important economic aspects that come with that move?
I would say that the biggest aspects that always come with any travel ban, quarantine, are obviously the airline sector, anything to do with hotel, restaurant, hospitality, entertainment, music, and the arts, because it is important to note that many of those countries that are impacted by this travel ban are heavily linked to the tourism industry.
And we know that airlines were already taking a beating because of the virus before this, as well as the hospitality industry. What could we be looking at now that the borders are closing?
So the whole conversation on the borders being closed is one that I think was overdue, and having those open borders plus the inconsistent policies being rolled out in different countries in the EU has not helped curb the outbreak to date. But I would say closing borders is going to complicate further the airline business, train businesses, hospitality, and also individuals who work across borders.
Now, obviously, there's been quite a bit of confusion, hearing sort of mixed messages. So in terms of what people should really get clear on in terms of who can come in and the sort of products and services that are still available, give us some clarity if you can.
Sure. So obviously this whole conversation is still very fluid, but ultimately, if you are a U.S. citizen, you are fine to re-enter the U.S. from Europe right now. Although after coming back, there is going to be a testing period and a quarantine period too. Now, as far as goods and services go, all of that is being hashed out right now, and I do know that on Monday, the top finance ministers out of the top nations in Europe and here are going to be hosting a call to hopefully hammer out some of those open items.
Now, we did see the European Commission say, look, we're essentially blindsided by this travel ban. So what's your take on how European countries are handling this outbreak as calls for better coordination are really getting louder?
I would say that the calls for coordination are now very present, very top of mind, but ultimately took too long. I would say that the biggest upside or the core takeaway here is that in China, the biggest percentage of the outbreak was all concentrated in that one province, whereas in Europe, it's popped up all over the continent at different rates, and it's impacting different age groups in a number of ways. So it's really been tough to get one policy point of view, and I do think the lack of a overarching policy framework in the EU for healthcare policies has hurt them now.
And what do you think this is going to do for the economy? Obviously, it's still too early to say, but are you seeing any early signs of an impact?
I would say ultimately it is going to have a downward impact overall. But as far as the actual areas that are going to be hit, I mean, the obvious ones are obviously healthcare, hospitality, tourism, and all that. But there are going to be some other knock-on impacts, but there also could be some opportunities for individuals who can work from home, who can outsource their work, who can do services that are otherwise going to be handled in-house by companies whose workers are unavailable.
Well, thank you for staying with us and giving us your insights. Sean Stein Smith there, Assistant Professor from Lehman College at City